It started with the smell of smoke, soft and slow like someone burning toast at 2 a.m. But when Liana opened her eyes, the hallway outside her bedroom was glowing orange. Her scream never left her throat. By the time the sirens reached 77th, and Lennox, her home was already a silhouette of black bones. 2 nights earlier, she had filed a complaint against a police officer. Everyone told her it wouldn't matter, but now her walls were ash, and her silence could no longer protect her. Did that single signature make her a target? Before we dive into what happened next, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if you believe justice is worth fighting for no matter the cost. Hit like and subscribe because tomorrow's episode will expose something even deeper than this fire. And it just might make you question everything. Liana Monroe didn't expect anything remarkable. When she walked into the 113th precinct that morning, she wore a navy blazer, her natural hair pulled back into a bun, and a folder pressed flat against her chest like a shield. The complaint she held wasn't just about Officer Camden Price's unwarranted stop last week. It was about every glance, every accusation, every humiliation she had carried since her teenage years growing up black in South River Heights. Officer Price had pulled her over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken, made her step out in heels on cracked asphalt, and called backup when she asked for a badge number. The moment he smirked and said, "You people always have something to say," she knew it wasn't about traffic. It never was. Inside the station, the front desk officer glanced up, saw her folder, and immediately shifted. "Internal affairs." "Is on the 2nd floor," he said before she could speak. That told her everything. He'd seen the look before. Filing the complaint took less than 45 minutes. The female sergeant assigned to intake typed slowly, eyes flicking between Liana's face and the form. At the end, she said flatly, "You understand this can take weeks, maybe months, sometimes it just ends in mediation." Liana nodded, but her voice was clear. "I want it in writing, and I want a copy." As she left the building, she didn't notice the man watching her from the black SUV parked across the street. She didn't notice the subtle tilt of his head when she exited, or the quiet tap of a text message being sent. What she did notice was the weight off her shoulders. For the first time in days, she felt like she'd done the right thing. She had no way of knowing that by nightfall, the whispers had already started circulating inside the department. By morning, Officer Camden Price would receive a call from someone high up, someone who told him, in no uncertain terms, to handle this quietly. And by the next night, everything Liana thought was protected by law would be tested by flame. The sirens came at 3:12 a.m. Neighbors thought it was a car backfiring or maybe just the wind slamming a trash bin. But by 3:17, the flames had devoured the front porch of Liana's small 2-bedroom home on Willow Creek Drive. By 3:23, the roof caved in. She and her daughter Amira were pulled out just in time, barefoot, coughing, shaking in their pajamas, as the fire department fought to keep the blaze from spreading. And when the smoke finally cleared, all that remained was wet ash and questions no one wanted to answer. How does a fire start in a house with no history of electrical issues? Why? Did the backyard camera suddenly cut out at 2:54 a.m., right before the motion detector failed? And why did the arson investigator seem more interested in her complaint folder than the actual cause of the blaze? Liana stood across the street, wrapped in a fire blanket, watching years of her life melt into black rubble. Amira clung to her leg, eyes wide, lips trembling. A firefighter asked if she had enemies. A cop suggested a short circuit. But no one, not a single person, asked her what she had filed against Officer Price. Was that a coincidence? Or something far more dangerous? So here's the question for you watching right now. Do you believe this was just a random accident or a warning? Comment number 1 if you think Liana was targeted because she spoke up, or comment number 2 if you believe the system will try to convince her and all of us that it was just bad luck. If stories like this matter to you, hit like and subscribe, because what happens next will expose more than just flames. It may burn through everything we thought justice protected. But the real question is, when Liana starts pushing for answers, who will try hardest to stop her, and how far will they go to silence her again? By morning, the story had already been reshaped. Local news ran a 30-second segment calling it a suspected electrical fire. A press officer stood calmly on camera outside the charred remains of Liana's home, assuring the public that foul play is not suspected at this time. But Liana knew better. The fire hadn't started in the kitchen, where the outlets were faulty. It started in the hallway near the filing cabinet, the one that held the only printed copy of her complaint against Officer Derek Price. 2 days before the fire, she had submitted that complaint directly to Internal Affairs. She had also uploaded a scanned version to the department's complaint portal just to be safe. But now, staring at the blackened ruins of her cabinet, she reached for her phone and logged into the site again. The page didn't load. She refreshed. Still nothing. Then came the error message. File not found. Her heart dropped. She called the department. Waited. Transferred twice. Finally, a voice answered, but the tone was curt. We have no record of any active complaint under your name at this time, ma'am. Are you sure it was submitted? Liana's voice shook, but her memory was crystal clear. She'd submitted it. She'd even received a confirmation email. She opened her inbox, scrolled quickly. The email was gone, deleted, even from the trash folder. She sat on the curb across from her house, ash still clinging to her skin, rage building under the surface. Her daughter was asleep in the neighbor's guest room. Everything they owned was gone. And now the complaint that started all of this had disappeared like it never existed. She wasn't just being silenced. She was being erased. That afternoon, she drove across town to the Community Justice Center, where her former college roommate, Sasha, worked as a civil rights attorney. Sasha didn't say much when Liana walked in, just pulled her into a long, quiet hug and led her to her office. They're not just trying to scare you, Sasha said, after reading the few screenshots Liana had managed to recover from her phones. Back up. They're trying to make you doubt you ever said anything at all. Liana stared at the floor. What do I do now? Sasha's eyes sharpened. Now. We go public. If they want to make this disappear quietly, then we make it loud. But, Liana hesitated. She wasn't just a woman seeking justice anymore. She was a single mother with a child who barely survived a fire. Going public meant more risk, more attention, more retaliation. And if someone had already set her house on fire, what would they do next? Because the more she thought about it, the more it felt like this wasn't just about Officer Price. This was about something bigger, something rotting beneath the surface of the badge, and whatever it was, it had just begun to move. By the next day, a manila envelope slid under Sasha's office door changed everything. No return address, no fingerprints. Inside, one flash drive, one photo, and a printed note with only 4 words. Stop digging or burn again. The flash drive contained grainy footage, grainy but unmistakable. It was a camera feed from a gas station across from Liana's house, time-stamped at 2:13 a.m., the night of the fire. It showed a dark SUV pulling up. A figure exited, crouched beside the house, and moments later, flame bloomed like a flower in the night. The figure walked back, calm, unhurried, got in, drove off. But it wasn't just the act that sent chills down Sasha's spine. It was the badge clipped to the man's belt, flashing briefly in the light of the pump. That wasn't just arson. That was a message. Sasha turned to Liana, her voice a low whisper, like they were already being listened to. Do you want to go through with this? Liana didn't blink. If I don't, what's next? They show up at my daughter's school? Sasha nodded slowly. Then we go nuclear. That evening, they contacted Maya Rowland, a well-known independent journalist who had exposed 2 major corruption cases involving city police departments in neighboring states. Maya didn't hesitate. Send me everything, she said, and keep it off email. We meet in person only. Within 48 hours, Maya had compiled a preliminary dossier, 5 excessive force complaints against Officer Derek Price, 3 of which never reached trial, 1 settled quietly with a sealed NDA, and 1 withdrawn under unexplained circumstances. Then she widened her lens. Of the 23 complaints made to the department in the past 2 years for racial profiling and violence, 16 were against officers from the same unit, Price's unit. Now the question wasn't whether this was systemic. The question was who was protecting them, and why. That same night, Liana returned to her temporary rental to find her mailbox pried open. Inside wasn't mail. It was her daughter's missing toy rabbit, burnt slightly at the edge, and a note stuck into its ear. "We see you. Let's pause right here. If you were Liana, would you still keep going, or would you take your child and disappear? Comment number 1 if you think exposing the truth is worth the risk, or tell us how you'd protect your family in her shoes, like if this story has you hooked and angry at how far injustice can go. Subscribe if you believe the truth must come out no matter how dangerous the path. And now here's a question you need to think about before the next part. What happens when the people you trusted to protect you start showing up at your door uninvited, smiling like nothing ever happened? Because in part 6, Liana's about to find out what real silence sounds like when it comes from the top. Are you ready for what's coming next? Liana didn't sleep that night. She sat, upright in the kitchen, the burned rabbit on the table in front of her like a twisted reminder of what she was up against. Morning light didn't bring peace. It brought a knock on the door, not a bang, not a warning, just a soft, deliberate rhythm. When she looked through the peephole, her stomach turned. Standing there in a freshly pressed uniform was Lieutenant Ronald Gibbs, head of internal affairs. She hadn't called him, no one had, but here he was, as if summoned by the storm itself. When she opened the door, Gibbs offered a tight smile. "Miss Ellery, mind if we speak privately?" Liana hesitated. "I'm not sure this is appropriate." "I think you'll want to hear what I have to say," he replied smoothly. He stepped inside without waiting for a yes. The air shifted. Gibbs didn't bother with pleasantries. He gestured toward the rabbit on the table. "You think this is intimidation?" He gave a soft, almost pitying laugh. "It's not. It's protocol, just not the kind they publish." Liana folded her arms. "You're not here to help." "I'm here to warn," Gibbs said, voice dropping. "You're chasing shadows, Miss Ellery. These officers you're after, they aren't rogue. They're tools of something much older than this department, something that doesn't appreciate cameras and questions." Liana's voice was steady. "Then why not just kill me?" He tilted his head. "Because that's the old way. These days we erase differently. We turn you into a hysteric, a mother grieving a burned house who lashes out and can't prove anything. We bleed you slowly until no one listens anymore." She said nothing. Her silence was a shield. Then Gibbs leaned in. "Here's what I suggest. Disappear, take your daughter. New name, new town. We'll even help you get there cleanly." Or he let the second option hang like smoke. She looked at him, steady and cold. "You done?" Gibbs stepped back. "You think you're the hero in this story, but heroes need endings, and some stories don't get them." He walked out. As the door closed behind him, Liana locked it and backed away slowly. It wasn't the threat that chilled her. It was the calmness of it, the practiced tone, the certainty. Later that afternoon, Sasha arrived with Maya, both carrying files and faces pale with urgency. "There's been a leak," Maya said immediately. "I think someone's feeding your file to state media. The narrative's already shifting, painting you as emotionally unstable. An overzealous mother haunted by personal trauma. They're building their defense in advance." Liana's eyes narrowed. "They want to erase me." Sasha nodded. "Then we have to go faster than them." Maya spread out documents, internal audits, whistleblower tips, quiet settlements hidden under different department budgets. Names began to appear again. Officer Price, Captain Rayleigh, Judge Morgan Stone, and now a new one, Sheriff Dalton Whitaker, head of the county's task force initiative, a man with public awards for community reform and private connections to every case Liana had touched. Liana stared at the name, then at the others. "It's not just the department, it's a network." Maya nodded grimly. "And we just found its nerve center." That night, someone set fire to Maya's rental car. It didn't explode, just smoked. A message once again. But the question was, how many messages did they plan to send before someone sent one back? What if the only truth powerful enough to bring justice was the very thing that could get you killed? What would you do if every piece of paper, Every login, every file you uncovered came with a new threat, a new fire, a new warning to stay quiet. That's exactly where Liana found herself. 1 week after the house burned, 1 day after Maya's car went up in smoke, and just minutes after a package landed on her doorstep with no return address. Inside it, a list. Not a printed one, not a digital one. Handwritten, with ink that bled slightly into the paper. 27 names, all tied to misconduct, all connected to the same 5 law enforcement units, and at the very bottom, underlined twice in red, Sheriff Dalton Whitaker. Sasha stared at the list like it was radioactive. Where did this come from? I don't know, Liana whispered, but it's real. I recognize at least 8 of these names from the complaints I reviewed at social services, cases that disappeared or were dismissed with no reason. Maya scanned it quickly, and half of these are still active duty. One of them, Officer Kyle Bensley, was assigned to your neighborhood last month. You mean the same Bensley who ignored the arson call? Liana asked. Exactly. So here's the real question. How deep does this rabbit hole go? And more importantly, how many people are willing to risk everything to pull it into the light? Comment number 1 if you believe Liana should expose the full list publicly, even if it means risking her safety. Like this video if you believe whistleblowers deserve real protection. And subscribe if you think the system should be more afraid of silence than the truth. Because next episode, what's about to happen isn't just a leak, it's an explosion. But here's the cliffhanger. If this list was never meant to be seen, who sent it? And why now? The list didn't just shake Liana, it split her world into 2 timelines, before it arrived and after it existed. Before, she was a social worker turned reluctant whistleblower, dragging truth uphill with bloodied hands. After, she was holding a weapon too dangerous to speak aloud. Sasha knew it too. She started checking her rearview mirror every time she drove. Maya stopped sleeping at home altogether. They all understood now. Someone inside the system didn't just want them to stop. They needed them silenced. But silence wasn't an option anymore. Liana spent the next 2 days in a quiet borrowed office above a church basement, cross-referencing every name on the list. She used court archives, anonymous tips, even high school yearbooks. She wasn't just looking for proof. She was tracing patterns. Bensley had a brutality complaint dismissed in 2017. That complaint was filed by a man who mysteriously relocated out of state weeks later. Another name, Officer Trey Hill, had been on the scene of 3 separate teenage arrests, all of whom later pled guilty to charges that didn't line up with the incident reports. And Sheriff Whitaker. His name appeared in sealed testimony from a wrongful eviction case Liana had once been barred from accessing. Late that night, Sasha burst into the room holding an old, half-burned binder. "It was behind a false wall in the storage locker," she said breathlessly. Maya's old mentor had been collecting case notes for years before she died. Inside the binder, photos, notations, incident logs, all cross-validating Liana's list, pages that smelled of mold and smoke, but with truth etched into the margins like survival maps. Liana didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just reached for the red pen and started connecting the names across the timeline. For the first time she saw it clearly. This wasn't corruption. It was architecture, a design built to protect predators and bury the people who dared to resist. And as the church bells rang out for midnight mass just floors below, Liana circled a date in red on the final page, August 19th. The same date, 3 whistleblower affidavits had been marked unsubstantiated in separate counties. The same date a 14-year-old boy died in juvenile holding after being denied medical attention. The same date this year, the district attorney planned to announce his campaign for re-election. And now Liana had to decide, would she risk everything to break it open on that very stage, or stay hidden, knowing the machine would keep grinding lives into silence? August 19th came cloaked in southern heat and political theater. The city square was dressed in red, white, and staged righteousness. Banners waved, press cameras blinked like eyes that never slept. District Attorney Frank Delaney took the mic at precisely 10 a.m., his smile sharp enough to cut ribbon. But just beyond the velvet ropes, behind the barricades and glossy donors, stood Liana. Not in protest, not in fear. In full armor, truth and proof packed inside a brown envelope clasped in her hand like judgment waiting for a gavel. She didn't interrupt. Not yet. She waited until Delaney used the words justice, integrity, and commitment to community in one breath. Then she stepped forward. One step, two. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "Mr. Delaney," she said, "would you like to explain these before or after the news does?" Gasps. Cameras turned like hungry dogs. She raised the envelope. Inside, the list, the archived binder, copies of redacted testimonies, and a notarized affidavit from a retired clerk who'd confessed to tampering with case files under Delaney's orders. He froze. Not visibly, just enough for her to see it, in his eyes. The split-second recognition that his empire had sprung a leak no spin could seal. But even before he could answer, two officers approached her. "Ma'am, you need to step back." "That's fine," she replied. "Just make sure the press gets this." She handed the envelope to a reporter with the NBC tag hanging crooked on his lanyard. It was done. In one movement, she detonated the lie they'd built across an entire city. But here's where we pause. If you were in Liana's shoes, would you have done the same? Risked your safety, your job, your future to expose the truth? Comment number 1 if you believe silence is betrayal, or if you think she should have waited for a safer moment. And if this story is pulling something deep in you, something that says justice should never be convenient, go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and stay tuned, because this next chapter, it's where the real battle begins. And now the question that really matters. What happens when the truth starts to spread faster than those in power can contain it? Will the city rise with her, or will the machine find new ways to strike back harder? Let's find out. The footage aired less than 4 hours later. By evening, Liana's name was trending, first locally, then statewide. Delaney's PR team scrambled, issuing a vague statement about false documents and disgruntled citizens. But it was too late. News anchors dissected every page of the envelope. Bloggers unearthed old cases with identical patterns. And somewhere inside the nerve center of the city's justice apparatus, alarms were going off. But while the public flurry ignited like dry grass, Liana sat silently in a makeshift motel room off Route 92. She hadn't gone home. Couldn't. Not after what happened last time. The scars on her hands from the fire 2 weeks ago hadn't fully healed. Her body remembered every flash of heat, every second of panic, and every flicker of doubt when the sirens never came. Her phone buzzed. Again. Another message from an unlisted number. No threats this time, just 3 words. "You're not done." She stared at it for a long time. The words weren't intimidating. They were a prophecy. Because deep down, she knew exposing Delaney was only the beginning. The documents, damning as they were, had cracked the door open, but the system was already reshaping itself, like a monster learning to grow new heads the moment one was cut, and it was already retaliating. Earlier that day, a friend from the university called. "They're opening an investigation into your academic integrity," he whispered. "They're saying you manipulated student evaluations, that you fostered a toxic environment. Lies, fabricated nonsense. But that was the playbook. Discredit, distract, destroy." Liana didn't flinch. She'd expected this. What she didn't expect was the file Carter slid across the diner table the next morning. Carter was a former investigator turned fixer, quiet, precise, never spoke more than necessary. But his hands trembled as he handed her the manila folder. "You need to see this," he said. Inside, surveillance photos, grainy, time-stamped, real. One showed a man standing across from her charred home 3 nights before the fire. Another, closer, captured him holding a cigarette with a gloved hand. And the last photo, him walking into the district attorney's office through the back entrance the very next morning. No ID, no records, no public trace. But Carter had a name. "It's Miles Garner," he said quietly. "Private security, former military, off-book." And according to bank records I pulled, he received a lump sum transfer from a payee tied to the mayor's office 2 days after the fire. Liana closed the folder. No tears, no gasps, just silence, stretching thin and taut. Now, she knew the fire wasn't random. It was authorized. She didn't need justice anymore. She needed strategy. Liana stared at the file again later that night, hands steady, but heart pounding like war drums beneath her ribs. Miles Garner. The name burned into her memory like soot on brick. She had always assumed the fire was a warning. But now it was proof. Proof that this wasn't just about a corrupt DA or a biased cop. It was a network, a machine, oiled by silence and protected by shadows. But as she planned her next move, the phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then picked up. "Ms. Brooks," came a calm, clipped voice. "We need to meet. Now." The caller identified herself as Special Agent Noelle Fry from the Department of Justice. "We've been watching this unfold," she continued. "Your exposé put a crack in something we've been circling for years. We need what you have. But more than that, we need your help." Help. Liana didn't laugh. She didn't have the energy. But her silence said enough. "We know about the payments," Frey continued. "We know about the fire. And we know this goes all the way up. Not just Delaney, not just the mayor." The line went quiet for a beat. "This touches federal appointments." That's when it all clicked. The reason no one stepped in, the reason the complaint disappeared, the reason Delaney had been so smug, even under pressure, because someone higher up was protecting him, and if she kept digging, she might finally uncover not just the rot, but the roots. So here's the question. If the government offered you protection in exchange for your silence or cooperation, would you take it? Would you trade your voice for safety? Or would you keep risking everything even after they'd already burned your house to the ground? Comment number 1 if you believe Liana should keep going, even if it means going against the federal powers that be. And if you're as hooked as we are right now, like this video, subscribe for the next part, because we're about to follow Liana into a web of corruption no one expected. But here's the cliffhanger we didn't see coming. What if someone inside, the DOJ isn't who they claim to be? What if this offer of protection is just another trap? And if Liana accepts, what exactly is she walking into? Let's keep going. Liana met Agent Noelle Fry at a nondescript federal building 2 hours outside the city. Its blank concrete facade more prison than office. She was escorted through 3 layers of security before being brought into a small, windowless conference room. There were no flags, no portraits, just a table, 2 chairs, and a stack of red folders that looked like they'd been touched by fire. Frey entered 5 minutes later, alone, her badge flashing for just a second before she slid it back into her coat pocket. "What I'm about to show you," she said, "doesn't leave this room." Liana nodded, unsure whether to feel fear or anticipation. Frey opened a folder labeled Project Cedar, and what spilled across the table shattered everything Liana thought she knew. It wasn't just one officer, not just one prosecutor. The names tied to the buried complaints reached into multiple counties, into judicial advisory boards, into campaign donor networks. Even non-profit shelters that Liana had once supported were listed as financial conduits. "They fund both sides of the fight," Frey said quietly, "the abuse and the cleanup. So no one ever wins, only recycles." Liana's breath caught when she saw a photograph clipped to one report, her former law professor, a man who had once helped her write her first discrimination brief, now listed as a trusted legal suppressor tied to 3 dismissed complaints from black female plaintiffs. It wasn't just betrayal. It was systemic hypocrisy, smiling in the face of justice while signing its death certificate behind closed doors. Then Frey slid over one last file, thinner than the others, but far heavier in implication. It was about Liana, not just her complaint. Her home, her family, her law school application essay, her finances, her student loan records. "You've been on a list," Frey said, "since the moment you interned for the judge who ruled against the city on the Blakeworth civil rights case in 2014. Liana couldn't speak. Her entire career had been watched, categorized, prepared for sabotage, long before she filed anything. Then Frey asked, "Are you ready to testify?" It wasn't a challenge, it was a warning. Because if you say yes, there will be no going back. They'll come for your friends, your past. Every mistake you've ever made will be amplified. Every truth you speak will be questioned. They will try to turn your voice into noise. Are you ready for that? Liana didn't answer with words. She reached into her bag, pulled out the charred remains of her original complaint, what she had found in the rubble of her home. She placed it on the table. This is the only piece of evidence they didn't erase. Let's make sure they regret leaving it behind. The room fell silent. Frey nodded once. A storm was coming, and they both knew it. But for the first time, Liana wouldn't be facing it alone. The courtroom was packed, not with spectators looking for drama, but with reporters, federal observers, former plaintiffs who were never heard, and families who'd buried justice alongside loved ones. Liana walked in wearing a grey suit that didn't scream victory but resilience. Her steps were steady, not proud, her jaw set but not in anger. She wasn't here for vengeance. She was here for exposure. Agent Noelle Frey sat beside her, a silent shield as the DOJ began proceedings to launch a full federal probe. The judge presiding wasn't someone Liana knew, but he looked at her with the kind of focus that made it clear this time the record would not vanish. As evidence poured out, emails, deleted logs, financial trails, doctored arrest records, the defense tried everything. Delay tactics, objections, character attacks. They even brought up Liana's high school suspension for a protest she'd led against a racist dress code. She smiled. They had to reach that far back to find something, she whispered to Frey. But then came the twist no one expected. A former city official, anonymous until that morning, took the stand. He confirmed everything and more. A secret memo passed to prosecutors warning about volatile plaintiffs. A city memo suggesting financial containment options for whistleblowers. And a chilling admission. Yes, Liana Trent was flagged. They knew she wouldn't stop once she started, so they tried to stop her first. Every eye turned to her, and she didn't blink. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been told that fighting for justice would ruin your life? Have you ever watched someone lose everything simply for speaking the truth? If you believe what Liana did was brave, comment number 1 right now. And if you think these systems count on our silence, then like this video and subscribe so more. Voices like hers never go unheard again. But here's the question we all need to ask now. If Liana stood her ground and the system finally started to crack, what happens next? When those in power decide to rebuild it stronger, darker, quieter? Are you ready to find out what rises from the ashes? Because this story isn't over. Yet so let me ask you, how far would you go if speaking the truth put your family in danger? If your name was dragged through the mud, your house reduced to ash, and the system called you a problem instead of a person, would you still stand? Firm like Liana did, or would fear have silenced you? Comment number 1 if you believe what Liana did was necessary. If you believe more people need to stand up like her, like this video. Subscribe if you want more stories where truth is louder than threats, and share this video if you believe someone out there needs to hear it. Someone who's been silenced too long. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for caring about justice that doesn't wear a robe, but wears bruises. Until the next story, keep your eyes open, your voice steady, and your heart unshaken. Because the people watching you may one day need your courage. Stay strong. Stay awake. God bless you.